Hello, and welcome to Lesson 5 of the Language and the Media Scheme of Work. This is looking at how language is used to challenge stereotypical representations in texts. We looked at something similar in language and gender, but it's always worth having another look at sort of how it's done. Just first task says here, men in the media, women in the media. Consider the representation and coverage of the different genders. What are your expectations? As in, what do you expect to see in terms of topics, the focus of discussions about men and women in the media, the language used, so any of the lexical things, grammatical things, so on and so forth. I've just said at the bottom here, you generally need to come to a text with some pre-awareness of what you might find, because if you expect to find it and it's there, it's something to comment on. If you expect to find something and it's not there, it also may be worth commenting on because it may suggest things about kind of the purpose of the article being somewhat different to what you might expect. 5 minutes, as always, about 5 seconds on the video. So have a look at the three images and the language that's being used. Outside of the content, the actual sort of decisions of what's in there in terms of topic, are there any other notable lexical, grammatical, or pragmatic choices? Have a little bit of a look. Don't spend too long on this. It's just something to get you thinking before we move on to the next text that you're going to look at in a bit more detail. So as I mentioned at the start, we've actually looked at something like this already. We looked at Theresa May and her husband, and also David Cameron's wife, Samantha Cameron, as well. It's, as I said, it's worth looking at articles that call out stereotypical reporting a bit more, because or use the conventions of that reporting style to satirize it. Because if there is such a common convention in the media, it's worth obviously looking at that in more detail, and then also sort of seeing how people might, in some ways, subvert that. So that's why we're going to look at another couple of articles that kind of look at that idea in more detail, without just looking at the gender side of things as well, because as you can see, it's Bill Clinton, so you can talk about ideas around power and things like that as well. So it just says here, imagine if the media talked about male politicians the same way it does about female ones. And that article that you've got starts, the husband of presidential candidate Hillary Clinton stole the spotlight on Thursday night with his stunning wardrobe choices. Now, I've said read the article and then start by identifying how the language levels are being used. Example can be seen on the left. You don't have to go into massive amounts of detail here. This is just a quick annotation. What do you find before I give you some examples that you can look at in more detail? I've so the examples here, for example, so pre-modification of choices, so focus on looks. So stunning wardrobe is pre-modification. It changes the word choices, and it's the focus on how he is dressed more than anything else. It could be any, he makes lots of choices. The fact that it focuses on how he looks is worth noting there. And the fact that he is described as, the noun phrase is used, husband of presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Notice that he is not Bill Clinton, he is belonging to her in this instance. The article's quite short, so sort of give it sort of 10 to 15 minutes between reading and annotating. So underneath the article in the document I sent you, there is actually a table of things you could have identified. Now, this is not saying that these are the only things you can identify or that you should have necessarily identified them. It's just giving you a sense of the things you might look for. So you've got the linguistic terminology on the left, you've got the example down the middle, and then you've got representation box on the right. See, representation box here, basically all I'm looking for is what does the language choice show us, as in how does it create representations of Bill Clinton or things around him, and how does it help create meaning for the audience? Remembering that this is satirical, so as much as it is being used about Bill Clinton, it's being used to mock the idea of how this is used for articles about, say, Hillary Clinton or any other women in politics. There's a couple of things on the linguistic terminology that you might not have come across before. Foregrounding is the idea of the thing that's sort of given prominence in a sentence. We don't really talk about that too much, but it's the idea of the thing that is given. It generally starts off a sentence because it's the thing that is most important. And then there's talk about agency here, which is the agency is the person who does the verb. So it's the person who the verb belongs to in some ways. And again, you can kind of look at that in a bit more detail. All the other things, within reason, I believe we've looked at before in some way, or you can work them out. So just work your way through. Again, probably should only take sort of 10 to 12 to 15 minutes at most. off the back of that, so you've done that. So you've been you've found your examples. You've then been given some examples to work on. It's kind of taken you through, and you should have quite a nice understanding of that text. Now, what I'd like you to do is to read the article from the Guardian. So this is a similar sort of article that doesn't necessarily it satirizes it in a different sort of way. So it just says here, create a table similar to the one for the Bill Clinton article. Pick out at least 5 examples of language use before exploring how each helps to create representations and meaning for the audience. Now, notice 2 things. The article is satirical and it is written by a woman. It's written by a woman because it's interesting to see. I believe the last one may have also been written by a woman, but it's interesting to see a woman's take on what is generally quite a gendered approach to reporting on women and men. I'd also like you to, I'm not just looking at representations necessarily of George Clooney, but we are looking at representations of the topics at large. So anything you can pick out that might be able to be linked to the audience, the satirical nature of this, the fact that it's been created for humour, the fact that it's been created to be interesting and engaging to an audience as much as anything else, any of that sort of stuff. This one's slightly broader in scope than the Bill Clinton one was. Okay, and just to finish off, it just says here. So this is, I think I might have shown this to you before, but if I haven't, obviously it's worth looking at. This is the task that you'll be asked to do in paper 2 in year 13, but this is the task you'll be asked to do in progression exams. Basically, it stays the same. It's always the same question. It's just that the resource itself changes. So it says here, choose either the Bill Clinton or the George Clooney article. Write 2 paragraphs that answer the above task. So it just says here, using your understanding of relevant ideas and concepts, investigate how language features and contextual factors construct meanings in the text. Note, the task always remains the same. Remember, AO2 and AO3 are focus, but need to also consider language. I suggest whenever you look at a text during this language and media scheme work that you write at least a paragraph and analysing it, just because it gets you in good habits in terms of what you're trying to do. I won't necessarily always be able to see that because obviously they're your notes and I know you've shared them with me, but I sort of go through them bit by bit. But if you have something in particular you want to draw to my attention and just have a look at, just email me, share it with me again, just draw my attention to it and I'll have a look at it. The quality of what I've seen so far has been very good and it is just good practice all in all. Anyway, that's the lesson. It possibly might take you slightly more than an hour, this one. But obviously the analysis of the 2 other texts, because you're choosing one or doing both depending, that's a slightly smaller lesson, I would argue. So therefore, do take your time that you need to do on this. You're looking at 2 different articles. You're doing them sort of in various different ways. So, just take the time you need. As always, any questions, let me know. Stay safe and be well, and I'll talk to you later.